Day 9. If you were tracking this on paper, you'd be looking at 9 full columns of hours checked off. 216 hours. And the clinical picture inside your body right now reflects every one of them. Pulmonary surfactant production has normalized. Vascular endothelial cells are undergoing active repair. The CD4-CD8 T lymphocyte ratio, inverted in chronic smokers, which compromises immune coordination, is trending toward normalization. Cerebral perfusion is improving as vascular tone in the cerebral arterioles recalibrates. Your liver's Cytochrome P450 enzyme activity, which cigarette smoke's polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons had artificially elevated for years, is normalizing, which has a practical consequence. Caffeine is now metabolized more slowly, so if your coffee intake hasn't changed, you may be feeling it differently. Day 9 is about the depth of repair, not just symptom resolution. That was days 1 through 5, not just surface-level tissue recovery. That was days 6 through 8. Today is about systems that you cannot feel directly. Gas diffusion efficiency in the alveoli, endothelial nitric oxide synthase function, cerebral perfusion pressure, GABA receptor tone. The body is rebuilding infrastructure. Hours 193 through 216. At hour 193, type 2 pneumocytes, the specialized cells lining your alveoli, have recovered their capacity to produce pulmonary surfactant at normal rates. Surfactant is a phospholipid protein mixture that lines the inner surface of your alveoli and prevents them from collapsing with each exhale. Smoking impairs type 2 pneumocyte function and surfactant quality. The consequence is increased alveolar surface tension, which makes gas exchange less efficient and makes the work of breathing slightly harder at rest. At day 9, surfactant production has normalized. Alveolar mechanics are operating closer to design specification. At hour 194, endothelial cells lining your arterial walls are undergoing active repair. Specifically, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that produces nitric oxide inside blood vessel walls, is recovering from oxidative uncoupling caused by years of smoke exposure. Nitric oxide bioavailability is increasing. This matters because nitric oxide is the primary vasodilator produced by healthy endothelium. More nitric oxide means better vessel dilation capacity, lower arterial stiffness, improved regulation of blood pressure at the tissue level. At hour 195, the CD4-CD8 T lymphocyte ratio is trending toward normalization. Chronic smoking inverts this ratio. The immune system's balance between helper T cells and cytotoxic T cells is disrupted. That disruption compromises the coordination of adaptive immune responses. At day 9, the ratio is correcting. Immune response specificity is improving. Hour 196 brings a practical pharmacological consequence. Cytochrome P450 enzyme activity, elevated for years by polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons from cigarette smoke, is declining toward normal. CYP1A2, the isoform most affected, metabolizes caffeine. As CYP1A2 normalizes, caffeine clearance slows. If your caffeine consumption hasn't changed, but you feel more affected by it, this is the mechanism. Your liver is no longer clearing it as fast as it did when smoking was inducing the enzyme. At hour 197, oral mucosal epithelium is actively regenerating. Leukoplakia patches, if present, are beginning to show regression as abnormal keratinization diminishes. The mouth's inner lining is returning to normal cell turnover rates. By hours 198 through 200, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis is recalibrating. Cortisol awakening response is normalizing, producing a healthier diurnal cortisol curve. New cilia are growing from basal bodies in the bronchial epithelium, increasing ciliary density beyond just the recovery of existing cilia. This is structural regeneration, not just functional recovery. And at hour 200, mitochondrial efficiency is improving because carbon monoxide's long-term inhibition of cytochrome C oxidase, the final enzyme in the mitochondrial electron transport chain, has fully resolved. Your cells are producing ATP more efficiently than they have in years. At hours 201 and 202, cerebral perfusion is improving. Vascular tone in the cerebral arterioles is normalizing, improving oxygen delivery to the brain. Cognitive processing speed and executive function are directly supported by adequate cerebral blood flow. The mental sharpness you may be noticing at day 9 is, in part, a vascular phenomenon, and periodontal ligament fibroblasts are recovering normal proliferative activity. The connective tissue around your tooth roots is healing. Periodontal pocket depth is beginning to reduce. At hour 203, plasma adiponectin, an anti-inflammatory adipokine that smoking suppresses, is increasing. Adiponectin improves insulin sensitivity, reduces hepatic glucose production, and exerts direct anti-atherogenic effects on blood vessels. It is one of the body's own anti-inflammatory signaling molecules, and it's coming back. At hour 205, the GABA system is rebalancing. GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. It dampens neural activity, reduces anxiety, and promotes calm. Nicotine modulates GABA receptors allosterically, meaning it changes how they respond to GABA without directly binding to them. After years of this interference, GABAergic transmission had been disrupted from its natural baseline. The anxiety of early withdrawal was partly driven by this disruption. The inhibitory brake on the nervous system wasn't working normally. At day 9, that rebalancing is measurable. Inhibitory tone in the central nervous system is approaching normal. Baseline anxiety levels are settling toward pre-addiction norms. This is not a psychological change that comes from thinking differently. It is a neuropharmacological normalization. At hour 206, transcutaneous oxygen tension in the skin is rising. Improved microvascular perfusion is increasing oxygen delivery to the dermis and epidermis. Enhanced oxygenation accelerates wound healing and supports the viability of hair follicles and dermal glands. At hour 207, plasma fibrinogen, the clotting protein that runs 10 to 20% above normal in smokers, is declining. Lower fibrinogen reduces blood viscosity and thrombus formation risk. At hour 208, serotonergic neurotransmission in the dorsal raphe nucleus is recovering from nicotine-induced desensitization. Serotonin normalization contributes directly to improved mood stability and reduced irritability. This is not abstract. The emotional resilience you may feel at day 9 is partly a function of serotonin receptor sensitivity recovering. At hours 209 and 210, adhesion molecules on vascular endothelium, ICAM1 and VCAM1, the proteins that help inflammatory cells stick to artery walls and begin the atherosclerotic process, are decreasing in expression, and olfactory receptor neurons in the nasal epithelium are regenerating. New olfactory neurons are maturing from basal stem cells. Detection thresholds for common odorants are decreasing, meaning your nose is becoming more sensitive. Smells that were previously imperceptible are becoming detectable. Some of them will be pleasant. Some will be newly offensive. At hour 211, intracellular glutathione, the body's primary endogenous antioxidant, chronically depleted by the oxidative load of cigarette smoke, is being replenished. Glutathione enhances detoxification and protects cellular membranes from lipid peroxidation. Your body's chemical defense system is being restocked. At hours 212 and 213, bronchial smooth muscle hyperreactivity is diminishing. The airways are becoming less prone to spasm. Salivary gland function is normalizing. Saliva composition, flow rate, and pH buffering are all recovering, which supports dental remineralization and oral antimicrobial defense. At hour 214, pineal melatonin secretion is normalizing. Nicotine interferes with melatonin synthesis pathways in ways that disrupted your sleep architecture for years. At day 9, melatonin amplitude is improving. The natural sleep signal is becoming more reliable. You may notice that you're getting drowsy at appropriate times in the evening without forcing it. At hour 199, the clinical timeline notes something that trips people up. Productive cough may peak during day 9, and it can be psychologically frustrating. Here's what's actually happening. New cilia are growing from basal bodies in the bronchial epithelium. Ciliary density is increasing. The mucociliary transport system, paralyzed and dysfunctional for years, is becoming increasingly operational. And it is moving material. Years of particulate deposition, trapped mucus, residual debris from damaged goblet cells, the airway's clearance system is finally moving this material upward and out. The productive cough is the mechanism of expulsion. It is not a sign of illness. It is not a sign that something has gone wrong. The clinical guidance is not to suppress it. Antitussives, cough suppressants, interrupt a clearance process that your airways need to complete. Stay well hydrated. Use steam if needed. Let the cough do its work. By day 10, mucociliary transport velocity will approach 70 to 80% of non-smoker normal. The cough will likely diminish as the backlog of material clears and the system reaches steady-state operation. But right now, at day 9, a productive cough is evidence of a working airway. Hour 216. 9 full days nicotine-free. In clinical terms, pulmonary function is measurably improved, systemic inflammation is substantially reduced, immune competence is approaching non-smoker levels, and tissue repair processes are operating at full capacity. The body's systems are not recovering in sequence. They're recovering simultaneously. The alveoli, the arteries, the brain, the immune system, the liver enzyme systems, the olfactory epithelium, all of them in active repair during the same window. The cumulative effect of 9 days of cessation across all of these systems is not additive. It compounds. You are 9 days into a process that continues for months. But the foundation is solid. Day 10 is where you hit double digits. Alveolar repair continues. Heart rate variability measurably improves. Epigenetic repair of DNA methylation patterns begins, and prefrontal executive